Welcome to the Attack Action Podcast,
where we talk about friendship, fun times, and most importantly, flesh and blood. Here are your hosts, Taylor and Isaac.
Hello, Attactioneers. I'm joined always by my best friend, Isaac. What's up, dude?
Just coming off a long weekend of really enjoyable flesh and blood games.
Yeah, so we got to participate in some PQs this weekend, and we literally just pulled into Isaac's house maybe 30 minutes ago or something like that. We played in Santa Clara and at Game Castle in Sacramento. Shout out to those stores.
Yeah, it was great. It was great to see the community there. I still have a little bit of, road brain. We were just on the road, hanging out, driving, playing games. Whirlwind back here.
Totally. We've been up to our necks, up to our eyeballs in flesh and blood for the last 4 days. We spent the whole drive down talking about flesh and blood, woke up, played flesh and blood all day, hung out with the homies, had dinner afterwards, talking about flesh and blood, and then rinse and repeat on Sunday. Drove home today talking about flesh and blood basically the whole time. And now we're going to podcast about flesh and blood. So,
yeah, well, in the midst of spoiler season and the very good timing they have with that, it really kept us, titillated.
Oh, yeah, totally. So I put this on Twitter, but we're coming into Sacramento late at night and 5 minutes before our turn.
Yeah, Taylor's driving. I'm navigating.
Spoilers are flying off the hinges on our phone notifications.
Switch to Discord. Both of us stopped thinking about the road.
Totally. And just missed our exit and added 40 minutes to our drive. Not because we were so without a place to exit, but because for some reason at night, nobody is working on on-ramps or off-ramps in Sacramento, but they're all closed. So we had to drive all around to freaking just go east. It was crazy, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah, totally.
On today's episode, we are going to be continuing our series on draft. So if you haven't heard part 1, go listen to that. We talk kind of about the beginner tips on draft and kind of break it down from a basic level. On this episode, we're going to go deeper into certain topics like card evaluation, identifying what cards are bombs, drafting a deck, not just cards, reading your seat, kind of going more in depth on that, and then kind of the round by round gameplay that you can then expect after having gone through a draft.
Yep. Hopefully without too much overlap. We might touch on things we discussed in the last pod, but this is definitely, the round 2. So go study up on the first round.
Exactly. So we won't be talking about any of the new spoilers that are dropping right now. We're recording this on Monday, 2 days left in spoiler season. But if you have not seen our spoiler reaction step, go over to our YouTube page. We have a video podcast with our best friend and producer Colin called The Reaction Step, and we usually have kind of a bit of a shorter form single subject video pod over there, and the most recent episode will be about our favorite spoilers from spoiler season. So if you want our hot takes and to see our handsome faces, head over there to the YouTube page to check that one out.
Yep. In other news, I'm sure as everybody knows and is rejoicing, both Starvo and Chain have hit Living Legend, really shattering this meta wide open right as we have a new set drop. So I am personally extremely excited both for the upcoming limited play, but also for the really incredibly diverse and healthy meta we're about to walk into.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. It's like this is probably the most excited I've been for a classic constructed meta. Two really dominant heroes leaving. We have an influx of brand new cards. We have, some theories about what is going to be kind of the most powerful decks that you need to beat. It's awesome. It's like everything you want. Anything can happen, and it's a great time to be a Flesh and Blood player right now in this very moment.
Yeah, definitely. We're also seeing, we're not going to get into this episode, but we're seeing the introduction of some new mechanics that will hopefully kind of expand how the game works and introduce a bit more interaction and different pacing for different matchups to really like diversify, sometimes a bit of a rock, paper, scissors or polarized meta or matchups you can be in. I'm really excited about some of the new mechanics.
Yeah, it's hopefully going to be great. Can't wait.
Yeah.
In other news, Road to Nat season is quickly coming upon us in July. 4 out of the 5 weekends in July are going to be Road to Nationals, and some of them are going to be draft, which is super exciting. A level playing field. It's not going to be so top heavy. There's, we're going to have to test in a different way for these sort of things. I think it's just really cool, especially with Lille being a dual format, and we know Nationals are dual formats also. It's great to have this kind of, next tier above an armory or a skirmish of limited competitive play that's not sealed, it's draft. So, it's really great for our podcast series we have coming out.
Yeah, definitely.
And I for sure called this on our last episode with Tommy Fresh, and that was before we had seen the retailer news that Road to Nationals was going to be limited. So,
Yeah, and just judging by looking back on the Aria set and how complex storied the exploration of that limited set was, I'm really excited for Uprising, right? Because that set came out, it was like everybody's hammering on Briar, and then Fatigue Oldhim comes out, and then after everybody's competing for those two archetypes, you can kind of spike it with being the only Lexi at the table.
Yeah.
And all of these developments were not immediately obvious and took months for people to really discover and explore. So I look forward to a similarly deep experience with Uprising, kind of, discovering new interactions and archetypes and ways we can, get tricky.
Yeah, it's going to be really great. I mean, me and you love Limited so much, and I'm just really excited to... for us, okay, so this is the situation me and you run into, in which we've talked about at length this weekend, but we have no ProQuests or Road to Nationals in our immediate area. We got to drive 4 to 6 hours for the closest ones. And so it's really hard to know regionally what those classic constructed metas are going to be like. So in this circumstance, we just have to be good at drafting Uprising, which we totally can do and practice. So I'm really excited for that to be, part of the competitive aspect of this game. And drafting is just so much fun. You get freaking sweet cards and stuff.
Yeah, you're a bit at the mercy of your table and the cards sometimes, but that's pretty heavily mitigated. And then it's just a level playing field and you're all on the spot in the moment.
Yeah.
It's really, but it's just so much fun that I don't know. I don't feel like I feel much pressure drafting because it's just it's kind of relaxed. You're just like, you're not bringing your own deck and worried about your matchups or like your gem for, you know, any of this stuff.
Yeah.
You just sit down with nothing and open a pack.
Yeah.
And it all kind of resets, at least in my brain, you know?
Yeah. I can't agree more with that. So, just awesome. Go ahead.
Well, lastly, I was going to say, you have a note in here about, our Patreon.
Yeah.
And supporting our podcast.
Totally.
We very much appreciate everybody for listening to us. Thank you all, everybody who's in our Patreon and in our Discord. You guys are a great flesh and blood family. So thanks for all your support, all your interactions. We love it. In addition, you know, the world is run by algorithms, so it really helps us out if you review, like, subscribe. Any button that pops up or you see, just like takes 1 second and, you know, helps us out.
Totally. Yeah. You can, you know, support us with your money through the Patreon. That's like one of the best ways to, you know, help us out and keep us going with our content and that sort of thing. If you can afford it, if not, totally cool. But you get like some cool stuff. You get access to the Discord. You get stickers, playmat if you subscribe at the highest tier.
Exclusive social hours, you know, the like.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of cool stuff for sure. On top of just like getting to feel good for supporting, you know, two of your favorite podcasts. Because we don't like. Sure, we have an affiliate link with Fab Foundry, which is another great way to support us. But really all and, you know, the little bit of kickback we get comes from just our Patreon, you know? So that's like the best way to make sure the money gets straight to us. And like Isaac said, other than that, review, like we have a lot of people on iTunes listening to us, so rate and review it there. That really helps us out and reaches a bigger audience. And telling a friend is really, really helpful. You're at Armory, just be like, check these guys out, blah blah blah, they're pretty cool, you know. So I mean, you know, sell it better than I did, but you know how to do that.
Yeah. There's also little perks, like, you know, if you are in our Patreon, we have social hours sometimes. We're going to get back into like, you know, commoner webcam tournaments, that kind of stuff every once in a while. We just, you know, produced a very beautiful custom playmat that we, you know, sold to our lower tier Patreons at cost. It was like $13 and our upper tier got it for free. You know, we try to, like continually give back and, you know, return the support.
Yeah, totally. Because it means a lot to us, you know, like, it's incredible that any of you decide to just give us your hard-earned cash, you know, and that's just from the bottom of our hearts. We can't thank you enough. So appreciate you all. Shout outs.
Yep. You got any shout outs?
I do. The whole Northern California crew. Like, so for me personally, the last time I went to an event was in, I think, March. And it was like last minute. My whole ProQuest season has been very low preparedness, last minute stuff. But getting to go back to the Northern California scene and just see all the homies that, you know, we all started in playing events in person during the Monarch meta, getting to see them is just great. It feels good and is comfortable. And it's just such a cool crew of people, and they're hilarious. Like on Saturday after our first ProQuest, like getting to have dinner with the homies at a nice Thai place was just like so much fun. Getting to make new friends, forge deeper bonds with already existing friends, and laugh and talk the game, and you know, and we appreciate how much you guys have welcomed us into your community, because we are very much outsiders or are extended Northern California, you know. And it's so funny. They're like, what's your local scene like up there? And it's like, it's us and 6 other people, you know. So if you are a local listening to this and you don't play in person, freaking get on that, please, so we can have like a bigger pool of players.
Definitely.
So shout out to them.
Yeah.
Great
and
crew.
I have a specific person to shout out. Everybody's great, but I played Shin for the second time, who is a Dory specialist. Every time I go, he top eights with Dory, and he's great. He's 2-0 against me. I kind of bring these like spiky decks. Like last time I was Prism hunting. This time I was playing Yuki's Yuki's Lexi list. And I have these kind of fragile like decks. And anyway, I sit down across from him. I'm like, all right, I'm going to play it tight this time. I know what Dory does, right? And then I draw 2 Art of Wars, a non-attack, and an amulet. And then he plays a new card I am unfamiliar with, gets 3 counters on Dawnblade turn 0. And then the game proceeds from there. And I was like, oh no, it's happening again. And proceeded to beat me yet again. So great job. As Flesh and Blood should be. I was unprepared for Dory. Did not know that matchup. Had maybe too cute of a deck or, whatever. And he just, beat me.
Smoked you.
Yeah.
Totally awesome. Quick tournament update from me. I scrubbed out of both tournaments. I punted so hard in my winning in on Sunday that it took me until the morning to recover. But then Isaac reminded me what happened, and I went back into PTSD. So that's basically how my weekend went. But I had a ton of fun regardless of my results. I definitely did want to do better than I did, but that was a pipe dream because I was unprepared for everything and making decks the morning of, had no idea what was going on.
Can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
players
totally.
are really good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I guess I took pretty much Yuki's list to. I lost in the semifinals of day 1 to Oliver on Prism. Very good Prism player. Has a lot of reps. Tough matchup for me. And I did not practice that matchup much. He, will probably handily win most of those.
Totally.
And then day 2, I wasn't so much results hunting, I guess. I switched to Kano. Just had to scratch that itch and went 2-3 though. I was, an unworthy wizard for now.
What's crazy, another story from this weekend, I know we're off topic here, but what was crazy is I played Starvo round 2, I think, on Sunday, and I got turn 1 crippling crush, Starvo activation, crippling crush, turn 2 Starvo activation, crippling crush, turn 3 Starvo activation, crippling crush, turn 4 Okanold fused, and then that was game. But and I wasn't even upset, it's just, that is a possibility, and that's just how it goes, and that's how the meta kind of can be, and it's just wild to not be upset by that insane amount of variance.
Yeah, I mean, it's how games go sometimes.
You know what I mean? It's just crazy. So
yeah, I had fun in every matchup except Prism versus Kano. That's just pretty uninteractive and kind of miserable. But the rest of them were just a blast, whether I won or lost. So thank you, everyone.
All right, on to the main topic. That was me diving into our topic. Pretty good sound effect. There you go, Colin. Transition. Okay, so we're going to start first with card evaluations. Okay, so this is a crucial part of drafting, is knowing what types of roles and how cards are going to function with different heroes. So I'll go first and I'll talk about one of the new cards from Uprising that's been spoiled for a while, and kind of how I would evaluate that card. So the card I'm going to use that as an example here to evaluate is Cold Snap. So it's an ice action, and it's the blue. So it's going to pitch for 3. It costs 1, defends for 2. And it has text that reads, target hero may pay 1 resource. If they don't, freeze a card in their arsenal or an ally they control until the start of their next turn. And a frozen object can't be played or activated. And then if Cold Snap is played from arsenal, you get a draw card. So in Uprising, we're looking at this card in Icelander. So it does quite a lot of things for her. So it's a ice blue card that she can play from arsenal at instant speed on her opponent's turn. So it gives them a frostbite, and it's going to replace itself and give her another card in hand, and gives your opponent something they have to think about on their turn on top of the frostbite.
Well, let me interject here also.
Okay, go ahead.
Another use of this card, right, is you can use it on your turn.
Correct, yeah.
So then you don't give them a frostbite, but the card you pitch to pay for it, you can use those additional resources to play something else on your turn.
Correct, yeah.
And it would still strip a card from them and still freeze their arsenal.
Right, or their
potentially.
Or their dragon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like a different use case, right? Like still like strips a card if it's your turn and frees their arsenal, but doesn't frostbite, doesn't surprise them,
Right. But it has go again, so you can play this, replace itself, then maybe play some more arcane damagey stuff, right? So it's a really flexible card in this scenario. It works both out of arsenal to slow your opponent down, or it works out of arsenal on your turn as an additional piece of your attack. So for me, this is a really good card because of how flexible it is within that hero. And so I would be happy to make this like potentially one of my like early kind of picks where I start hedging into like one class, right?
Yeah, I like this card in blue. For sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit like ways to evaluate cards, or this card, right? As we consider this card, you can look at cards for their individual power, like how they stand alone, right? Just like playing them on their own. You can also look at them in terms of their role or function in your deck or your archetype, right? So this card is a blue ice card, right? So for Icelander, she can play it on their turn specifically because it's blue.
Fuses. It also fuses.
Yeah, definitely. So if your goal is, some degree of disruption, which it most likely will be, this fills that role for sure. It is a blue, and her theme is blue cards. We don't know what her weapon is yet, but if, for example, you're playing with Kraken, it applies there as well, right? You can also look at the ability to block with this card. However, in this case, this is ideally a card you want to fuse and save.
Right.
But it does only block for 2, right?
Right. Yeah. And another example I have here is if we look at Tales of Aria and we look at something like Earthlore Surge yellow, right? So really powerful card. Yeah, at a yellow, at face value, right? It is a yellow, so it pitches for 2, cost 2, if we don't know what this does. So Earthlore Surge, yellow, pitches for 2, cost 2, is a earth non-attack action, so it defends for 2, and it reads the next attack action card you play this turn gains +4, go again. So really powerful effect, right? So it's an earth card, so you can fuse with it. It gives an attack, any attack, whether it's a elemental, a earth, ice, generic, whatever. It gives it +4. So super, super good.
Also, being a fuse card, it's a very friendly card to Arsenal, as it is easily played out.
Yeah, exactly. Because it has go again and is a non-attack and that sort of thing. So when we think about this card in terms of then the heroes, the 2 heroes that can play it are Oldhim and Briar. So if we think about this in Oldhim, it costs 2, and any of Oldhim's attack actions at minimum will also cost 2, meaning you will need 4 resources to play this and another attack, right? So you'll need to pitch at least 2 cards. You'll need to play Earthlore Surge and then an attack. So you need to have 4 cards just to get this ability off. So kind of a steep curve to get +4, especially in a format where the gameplay is very fast and you might not be able to hold on to all 4 cards. It also has kind of a downside of it not being a blue. So now you can't use it for Oldhim's defense reaction ability. It is a yellow, and you could argue that you can use it and another yellow ice card to do both at the same time or something like that, or a red ice card. But that's like a pretty rare scenario where you want to pitch 2 cards to do both reactions at the same time. And then it doesn't block for 3. So kind of generally in an Oldhim deck, it like isn't the best value for a pick, right? Because it has all of those potential downsides, even though it's a fuse, it does pitch for more resources, and it gives +4, which is bananas, right? But the downsides in Oldhim for a pick are like, I think, outweigh those upsides. Do you have any input on that, Isaac?
No, you want to go through the flip side?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So then this card looks, I think, better in a Briar deck. So it's a non-attack action, which she inherently wants. And most of her cards that she can play cost 1. So with Earthlore Surge being a cost of 2, and some of her cards being costed 1 or 0, it's really easy to pitch 1 card, a blue, and then play this and an attack. And then you get that +4. It's also a Earth card, right? So it fuses for her. And since she has the embodiments of Earth, that 2 block is like not the worst thing because it actually can block for 3. And then it gets the upsides of it being able to pitch. So in Briar, yellows are just fine as pitch cards because you might play a non-attack action like Electrify that costs 1, have something else that's free, and that could have go again into Rosetta, and that's only 2 resources. So Earthlore Surge also works as a pitch card. So for me, this is way more serviceable in a Briar deck and has a much better upside. So when I evaluate this card in a pack, if I'm in Oldhim, I'm going to probably look for something else. But if I'm Briar, I would really consider yellow Earthlore Surge for all of those upsides and synergies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It also is half of an embodiment of lightning token.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really good example of understanding the value of a card on its own, right? Like Yellow Earthlord Surge is a premium card.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. It's more powerful than most of the cards in the set.
Yeah.
However, when you consider it, like you said, with the, when considering the archetype you're trying to build and the hero you're trying to play, its value goes way up or way down.
Correct.
For sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I completely agree. In Oldhim, this is a card that you can get very stuck in your arsenal, for example. You work with what you got. So there are worlds where you keep your life total really high, and then you play this into a fused glacial or something, and that's the only win condition you managed, right? It's not a terrible card, but agreed, it's not very good. Yeah. If it was blue, it'd be excellent.
Yeah, totally. It'd be worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is like, yeah, I think that is a great example, right? Like card pretty good on its own, really good, not sure. But then when weighed considering your deck, like really, really varies.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, this is an exercise me and Isaac are starting for this next set of Uprising. And something you can do with your friends or alone, right, is you can go through every card in the set and give them like little notes or ratings on how good they are, right? Like if I were to give Earthlore Surge a rating of 1 to 3 stars, right? In yellow, right, Earthlore Surge for Oldham is, 1 star. In Briar, I probably give it 2 stars. The 2 cost probably keeps it away from that top tier, So you could do that for every single card in the set, and I think that will just help getting the practice of, okay, how am I going to evaluate this? Thinking about the card critically, breaking it down into its little pieces in all of its use cases, because that's one of the beautiful parts about Flesh and Blood is every card pitches, defends, and either has an ability text or is an attacking card, right? So it has all of that stuff.
And a last note for me on this card, and this maybe like branches out into a lot of different topics we're going to discuss, but there's also the consideration, there's like a lot of cards like this, right? Which are maybe not part of the core concept of your deck, but still function adequately in it, right? So like, I would still put a red Scar for a Scar into my Bravo draft deck because it's that good.
Right.
However, you also need to consider, of course, the deck you're drafting. Once you have too many red Scar for a Scars or these other cards that are powerful but are outside of what your deck is trying to do, then they become less appealing, right? So if I have a very tight Bravo list with several win conditions and plenty of blues, and it's a very good deck, and then I have 2 red Scar for a Scars in it, I think that adds value. But you don't want to keep, adding these yellow Earthlore Surges or these kind of like outlier power cards. Once it starts like maybe tilting your ratios or bringing down your consistency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah. Because it's fine to have like a bit of trickery up your sleeve, but you can't be all tricks or else nothing is a trick, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's like the old, I tell my some of my strength clients this is like, if every single training session is important, then none of the training sessions are important. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's not applicable, but is maybe applicable to you on a personal level. Shall we move on to identifying bomb cards now that we've learned how to evaluate cards?
Let me see. Sorry, I'm just refreshing myself on my So dang, how do I pitch this here? I guess so when you evaluate cards, I would say you can start with the base of like, how good is this card standing on its own, right? Like Red Autumn's Touch. Very good. Right? Blocks for 3, swings for a break point. 2 cards it's a very strong attack. It fuses. It fills a lot of roles, right? So even if you're in Lightning Briar, this deck or this card might merit inclusion anyway, just because of its strength, right? But after you start with that baseline, you really have to then move on to evaluating the cards, based on the functionality in your deck, right? So like an example that I have is Honing Hood, right? Mm-hmm. So for me at face value, I understand what this card does and all of the applications, right? It seems pretty good, but it seems okay, right? Pretty good for the game, but not going to win you the game, right? But then after playing with this card a lot in limited, you start to understand that, wait a minute, so this card fixes my worst hand or worst draw every single game.
Yep.
Right? So when I have a kind of clunky hand, I can cycle things around. If I have too many arrows and don't have to block with them, I can arsenal an arrow, and it fixes that for me.
Right.
So then when you start looking at a game that might only last 4 or 5 turns, and you literally, up the power of one of those turns by 50% or whatever it is.
Right.
and start looking at it this way, then this card becomes really, really good. So, yeah, in your card evaluation, I would just argue, none of these cards have their standalone value does not mean very much compared to their performance in their role,
right?
Or their applicability when playing. I'm not sure how to really eloquently describe that better.
Well,
do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that point comes up a lot more when we start talking about how to draft a deck, not just 30 really powerful cards, because synergy and combos and that sort of thing are an important part of Flesh and Blood, and equipment is a little bit trickier, but like typically having the equipment and figuring out how to utilize it is always better than like not having it, as well.
Definitely.
But yeah, the role honing hood plays, the upside of that is like really good when you evaluate it in that circumstance. Right. And if you were to think about like, well, it doesn't deal any more damage, or it doesn't give me like the advantage of having an extra card, or it doesn't block. So it's like, what are you really doing for me? But when you really stop to think about and evaluate that card in what its potential ability is, then it's like, okay, well, this is actually like pretty good. Because as soon as you lose tempo in a limited Aria game, you die instantly.
Agreed.
You're at 10 health, you lost tempo, you're dead. No way you're coming back.
Yep.
So if you can avoid that by using Honing Hood, it's huge.
Yeah.
Really, really huge.
So I have a little foreshadowing hot tip, and then we'll move into the next.
You got it.
The next topic. So my little tidbit here is when evaluating cards, I guess this is more of a live tip, right? But as cards move through your hand as you pass them in draft, it's important to also know or have evaluated cards based on how they will perform against you, right? So if I need to construct my deck and I can't afford to hate draft this red turn timber or this yellow sigil of suffering, I still need to note and remember how many of those are in circulation, or how many do I see, how many players at the table are those, or how many players at the table are diluting these powerful cards that I see go by. And then that will kind of play into some of your decisions later on when you sit down across from your opponents.
Wonderful.
That's all.
Bomb cards.
Ooh.
Okay, so everybody wants to just like have this sick bomb card and win the game, right?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's like the way, that's how we want to do it, But sometimes in Flesh and Blood, because cards do so many things and the game is so dynamic, it can be sometimes hard to evaluate bomb cards in certain sets until you kind of get your hands on it and play it a little bit. But I think it's getting easier for me and Isaac because we've now played like so much limited and we've been in the game for a while. So I think we have like kind of a better grasp on that. And another thing about that is rarity of a card does not equal its power level, right? So yes, some of the cards we're going to talk about in this segment are Majestics and are extremely powerful, but not all Majestics are as such, right?
Yeah, Remembrance, Toma Findal, with no Mage Master boots.
Right.
These are Majestics, but might not even be worth picking, depending on...
Rusted Relic is a super.
Yeah, totally.
Totally. And is not a bomb whatsoever. So those are some easy examples of like higher rarity cards that blow, So I'll just get into it. Okay. So,
well, also I'm going to preface by saying not many cards in this game are bomb cards, and that makes it a good game.
Yeah.
Most Majestics are not bombs. Right. Some are powerful and limited, some are less so, but it's a good thing that not a lot of cards break the game or make you win.
Yeah.
A lot easier.
Yeah. And like we talked about, I think in part 1, just because you open a Majestic or a Rare or whatever in that class, unless it is really the bomb card of the set, you don't need to be beholden to that hero. So keep that in mind. So the most bomby card I can think of is V of the Vanguard, right? And it's crazy because it's a rare, and that means it is really likely to come up in your draft. And what makes it so good is what's the word? Not collection, but it's a collection of all these little traits that add up into it being really, really powerful. So it's like a card that is relatively easy to just create a 20 damage turn.
Yeah, in of itself, it's like a standalone
20 damage
win
turn.
condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one V of the Vanguard has a really low cost, so it only costs 1. And then it has a very big synergy with the hero that it's for. So V of the Vanguard costs 1. It says charge. You may charge up to any number of light cards from your hand into your soul. If you do, attacks on the combat chain get plus X, where X is the number of cards you've put into your soul. So if you put 2 cards into your soul that are light cards, V of the Vanguard will then get plus 2. So it'll be a 1 for 5. And then everything else on the combat chain will also get plus 2. Which then, with Bolton's ability, his attack reaction, you get to banish cards out of soul to then give cards that have higher attack power than their base go again. So already, basically, V of the Vanguard reads, pay 1, charge a card, give it plus 1, and then everything else that you play this turn, you can give go again if you have enough cards in soul, right? So another reason it's really bomby is because it has a damage amplification ability that is persistent throughout the combat chain. So if for some reason, let's say you have we got our 4-card hand and we don't even have an arsenal, right? You got a blue and 2 light cards with V. So you pitch the blue, play V, charge those 2 light cards. V comes in for 5. You give it go again. Now you have a hatchet that comes in for 4. You give that go again. There's 9 damage. Then you have your last hatchet comes in for 5, right? So you've dealt 14 damage off of just a 4-card hand in a blue. Super easy. Now, if you had an arsenal card that is a 0-cost attack, which there are a ton of those in common, now you can add 5 more damage to that, and then boom, there's your 19 damage turn, no problem, right? You didn't even have to arsenal V and wait around. Basically, you need 1 more card in soul to make that happen. So another part, just to recap here, what makes it really good is that it's really easy to use. It has a lot of synergy with the hero. And then it also makes it really hard for your opponent to interact with it, right? So there's no way your opponent can really shut it down in that limited format. They just basically have to either take the damage or block it out, right? So that's what makes it really, really good. So you're either going to just deal them a buttload of damage and then be able to strip cards on the next turn, or they're at a life threshold in which they have to block and strip cards, and you can have a ton of tempo, right? So in those 2 scenarios, you can really win the game, assuming that you're not at 1 health and you have to block their turn with your V. In that case, then it blocks for 3, which is still pretty good. Did all of that make sense to you, Isaac, in that example? Was I clear and concise? Have you learned?
Yes. 100%.
Woo!
Now, so it's important to understand, right? So this is a really powerful turn, and it doesn't necessarily win you the game. But if you chip some damage first, you can go over the top and kill them, or you can deal so much damage they get so low on life that you can just pressure and kill them. Right. So these cards aren't just like a magic, ticket to get the W, but they're as close as you're gonna get.
Yeah, if you can deal 14 damage off of that card, then like just with your hatchets, not even attack actions, right? You only have 20 health, so they would only have 6 health in reserve if they did not block, which is pretty huge if you can just do that turn 1, or turn 2.
Definitely.
So that's a reason it's a bomb card. I have more examples. Would you like me to continue, or do you want to interject?
No, not at all. What's your other example here?
Okay, so my other example from Tales of Aria is Awakening. So it fits all of the criteria, right? Even though this card is now suspended, or is it banned?
I think it's
Classic Constructed.
I think it's banned.
Okay.
It's a pretty absurd card.
It's pretty absurd, but it's really bomb. So this is a Majestic. So this comes up way less, but you can get it early in a draft. It is worth drafting your deck around. So Awakening costs 2, and then you're going to make Seismic Surges, and it's an instant. Make Seismic Surges equal to the number of like difference in health.
Yeah, your health
totals.
Differential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it tutors a card from your deck. So and because it's an instant, you can play it on your opponent's turn, go get a really powerful card, and then your Seismic Surges break, and then you can play that card for basically free.
Yeah, and you can also, what you're going to target and what they're doing, so you can kind of block or take damage to just get to the right differential, right? So you want to go down 6 life exactly.
Right.
And then you play Awakening on their turn, fetch Glacial,
play Glacial
it
for
on your
free.
turn.
Yeah. Play Red Glacial for 10, and you might even have a Fuse card too, because you're taking this damage swing. So it fits all of the criteria, right? It is a easy card to play because it is low costed. It has an ability that your opponent cannot really interact with. It's actually very punishing for your opponent to like attack you and go lower. And with cards like Glacial Footsteps that you can then play for free, you can save an ice card relatively easily to give it Dominate and kind of win the game on the spot, right? Red Glacial comes in for 10, Dominate. And when you only have 20 health, that's half of your health total. That's just going to be deleted in the game, right? So, and just like it might not like win you the game, but it's going to steal you a ton of tempo and get you really close to your win condition. It could win you the game because you could dominate Glacial Footsteps. But so that would be another example of a bomb card, right? Is that it doesn't really fit the criteria of working with your hero's ability in a really synergistic way, but it fits with the cards you have in your hero's deck really well. Easy to play. Your opponent can't interact with it. And is just really good.
Definitely. I have a couple examples I wrote down here.
Sure.
I listed Induction Chamber. I know they're having problems with that at really big events in the Arcane Rising meta. Just really, really powerful. Enables you to, kind of fatigue or tempo your opponent with basically too strong of a weapon when paired with Dash's ability. I also put down Winter's Wail because that card is absurdly punishing. Just a straight upgrade. It's pretty nuts, and kind of in a set where you don't have a lot of armor or like free defense reactions to like kind of combat that or buy yourself a turn.
Yeah.
It's like really oppressive. Again, you could a Fatigue Oldham can beat a Winter's Wail deck, or it's
right.
It's not unbeatable. And the last one I put down here is, I've never pulled this, but I would imagine Blazing Aether is a pretty bomby card.
Right.
Or maybe Lessons in Lava. But just because Blaze, and if you hit it off the top or you Kano on, your turn and then use your action point to play Blazing, or you lead the charge Voltic, then Blazing. It just, in my mind, is probably really powerful in a game where there's not much arcane barrier. Just due to the amplification effect. Now there's like a number of cards also that are like extremely powerful unlimited, but are like, I don't know, maybe less of a win condition, or maybe by your parameters a little bit. It's not a bomb because it doesn't just like give you a huge leg up in the game, and some of these cards like Tear Asunder, right? Rites of Lightning, my favorite draft card. Soul Reaping, I think, is insane. Even like Barraging Beatdown Red, right, is really, really powerful, but it's kind of just a piece. These are really powerful cards in your deck, but on their own are not like this huge kind of like overpowered combo. Where would you put Oakenold here?
Yeah, Oakenold, I would say, is definitely a bomb card because of all of the other things we've talked about, right? It's really easy to play. It's a 3 for 7. So you just need 2 cards to just do 7 damage, which is really good in Tales of Aria Limited. And then you have just ice and earth cards in your deck already. So fusing it is like not too challenging, right? You can park it in Arsenal and it comes up pretty easy that you have an ice and an earth card in there, and you can get that dominate tempo stealing effect, and now you have 9 dominate and they lose 2 cards. It's definitely a bomb because it's like easy to play. It sounds like it's not, but in practice it is like pretty easy.
Yeah, and in my mind, I mean, it's a huge card because of the 3 for 7 aspect. Like the downside is like non-existent. Right?
Yeah,
it blocks for 3, or you can just play it as 3 for 7.
Yeah,
which is pretty insane. If it costed like 5 and blocked for 2, then you like, I mean, you probably still include it in your deck because of the upside, but it just gets like a lot more of a weighing what you need kind of situation here.
Yeah. On kind of the same note. So I've been looking at like the spoilers for Uprising, and I'm starting to inch my way into thinking that maybe Ice Eternal, which is the Icelander specialization, one of them, might be kind of bomby in this set as well. So it's a blue that blocks for 3. It's an elemental wizard action, so it doesn't give a frostbite really, but
yet
it has ice fusion, and so it reads it has an XX ability. So it says create X frostbite tokens under a hero's control. Then if Ice Eternal was fused, deal arcane damage to that hero equal to the number of frostbites they control, right? So X is equal to the amount of resources you pay. So with 3 blues, you can pump this bad boy up to 4. So you could deal 4 frostbite tokens and deal 4 arcane damage, which I don't see how anybody can then like continue their turn after that, especially when the other 2 heroes have a lot of red cards. So it feels very bomby and tempo steely to me, right? You like literally freeze them in their tracks and deal 4 damage to them. So it could really slow them down and give you the tempo back you need in that game, or just win you the game because it's like 4 damage. But that's 4 damage at instant speed. But with maybe the what are they called? Ash Wings out there with Arcane Barrier, it might not be super viable. So we'll have to see what the arcane prevention stuff is. But
yeah.
Anyway, I could be totally wrong, but that card just seems really strong to me in this limited format.
And one little note about bombs is that they still have to fit your deck, right?
Yeah.
So if you open a V pack 2 or pack 3 especially, and you're not in Bolton,
no reason to
pivot.
Yeah.
Right? You probably hate draft it because you don't want to see it.
Yeah.
But you can't pivot. I learned this lesson when I picked an Induction Chamber pack 2 when I was not in Dash and my deck was too weak.
Right.
To be like overly powerful. So despite the power level of these cards and the fact that you should probably hate draft them away from whoever is in that role. You have to see it pack 1 or be lucky enough to be in the role to pick it. Right. There are limits to, like I said, if you open something pack 2 and if you pivot, you're just going to have this like kind of garbagey deck with 3 cracked baubles. This card may not win the day. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Even though it is really good. I mean, it's a way for you to deal consistent 4 damage every single turn, right? And that's what Winter's Wail does. That's even if you don't have ice cards, Winter's Wail is like a strict upgrade from Titan's Fist because it doesn't have the like restriction of sometimes only dealing 3 damage. It just deals 4 no matter what and has an upside of a hit effect. Yeah. A lot of the majestic weapons are like that, right? Dread Scythe and Monarch, busted. There's no arcane barrier. It comes in every time with a free arcane for 3 resources. You can shackle it. You can play seeds into shackle bounding, then play your blue. Like, that's crazy. It's a crazy turn. That weapon's nuts. So yep. That's it. That's what I got on bomb cards.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
What's our next topic?
Our next topic, I'm going to have to come up with a sound effect for this, is we're going to be talking about drafting decks / archetypes, not just cards.
Right. This kind of ties into some of the things I was talking about card evaluation earlier.
Right. Okay, so this is not really like a new concept within drafting, and it's something we've talked about in other episodes, and we talked about it on part 1. But I think this is something that's overlooked because you get kind of, drawn into the power of cards, thinking that also equates to the power of your deck. But in reality, it is the synergy of the cards and their relative power level that helps your deck become more powerful, right? You can't just pick all red cards that cost 3 and deal 7 and then not pick any blues or, what have you, Actually, maybe you could if they all blocked for 3, because then you could just like block for 6, attack for 7, block for 6, attack for 7. We have that archetype in Oldheim right now.
Yeah, but I completely agree. And it's pretty hard, even if you're aware of this kind of phenomenon or habit. It does become very difficult to not kind of fall into this pattern, right? Like, so if I'm drafting Briary, and I have like a lightning surge, and then, I get a lightning press, but then some other cards come around and I'm like, oh, I'm going to pick this red Stir the Wildwood, and this Bramble Spark's really good, and these are all really, really powerful cards. And I'm like, well, I have enough earth cards or I have enough lightning cards, and I can draft enough earth cards in the future here to like make these work, or, and it doesn't mean you can't mix it up a bit or like have run all the powerful cards, but, then you got to weigh the consistency of your hands, right? So then if I draw these cards that, how good are these cards if I can't fuse them? Or right. How good are these cards if I can't make an embodiment of lightning token? Or, like what's the cost curve I'm looking at here when I have like, very few resource cards, and now I'm leaning into a whole bunch of like 2-cost pumps and 2-cost, attacks or whatever. Right. So, it's tough, right? Like the last time I drafted Kano, I started foregoing like red Voltic Bolts or whatever to try to up my blue count. But I did it a little bit too late because I was like, all right, I need more blues mostly. But then I heat drafted some Arcane Barrier, and then I like got, I might have had like 12 or 13 blues, but a couple would brick off the top, and it was a little bit too few because I was like a little bit unaware, maybe a little bit too greedy. Right. I was like, oh, I can run one more of these red, these red cards, and so it's hard to stay incredibly disciplined, right? I guess. Yeah. When you're like, oh, but so what's the upside of throwing this red Stir the Wildwood in there,
Right. Yeah. And Tales of Aria is a great lesson in drafting decks, not power cards, because not all of the elemental cards synergize with the heroes that can run those elements. So I think Lexi is a great example of this. So Lightning Surge is a lightning card that gets go again when you play it from Arsenal. But Lexi's ability allows you to flip up a card in Arsenal. And if it's lightning, gives an attack go again. So in a scenario where you have multiple non-go again attacks that aren't arrows in your hand, Lightning Surge is great. But then the synergy of your deck is really low. So then you have a lot of Heaven's Claws that you're playing from hand that have no hit effect and are just raw damage and cost 1, right? For the flip up effect of Lightning Surge, if there were any synergy. The best synergy in Lexi is to have a lightning card like Electrify or Heaven's Claw that gives Heaven's Claw will give itself go again, which is really nice. Or Electrify is a non-attack action that's lightning that you can then play out, and now one of your arrows you can load will have go again. So that's like better synergy. Even though Lightning Surge, let's say red, is a 0 for 4, it has go again, and it fuses, the synergy with Lexi is a little bit lower than it is in Briar. So then if you have that in Briar and you play your non-attack action and then play that free go again attack action from your arsenal to get go again, now you can get to Rosetta and get that free arcane damage, right? So the synergy with a Briar deck, red Lightning Surge, or any of the Lightning Surges really, is a little bit higher than it can be in Lexi, right? So that's when we're talking about drafting decks and not just cards, right? Am I going to have the synergy in my Lexi deck for this Lightning Surge, or should I pick up this Heaven's Claw instead, or this Electrify that are maybe at like yellows or blues for the off chance that they have to fill that other specific role, right?
Yeah, I hear you. I still think Red Lightning Surge is really good in Lexi, but point taken that the added benefit of getting to Rosetta makes it have more value in Briar for sure. And you can look at, there's a lot of powerful cards like this, like Red Weave Ice, for example, right? I mean, this is a good card in Oldham, right? You can arsenal it and you can pump an attack because it's free. It's an ice card, so you could have fused with it prior before you arsenaled it. Still has a lot of value. But this is, I would say, pumps in Lexi are your number one priority. I mean, you could argue red arrows maybe, but pumps have a lot of value.
Yeah.
However, depending on your Oldham archetype, Red Weave Ice might be a bit lower on your priority list. If you're going for kind of a fatigue strategy, Red Weave Ice isn't going to do anything for you, right? It might not even make the cut. If you're going to try to tempo them, or you're more on an aggressive 3-for-7 ice strategy, it might get a bit better, right? It can be a win condition because it gets dominate if the attack's fused. But, these are, it goes from being a good card or an okay card, or, if you're deep control, not a great card at all, to being a very, very powerful card, in a Lexi build.
Right. Yeah. So, and that goes back to also like our card evaluation. Like these two things have a lot of interplay. These two topics, drafting decks rather than drafting cards, and identifying those cards. Those two have a lot of interplay. Another example I have is if you're in a certain archetype of Bravo from Welcome to Wraith, a lot of his hero ability in Anothos is synergized around cards costing 3, but there are also a lot of cards that have a cost of 2 that are Guardian traded, like the Guardian Auras, that give your attack, that like buff your attacks or that sort of thing, and those are enticing to get those big attacks really huge, and you're already pitching perhaps 4 resources anyway, so why not just tack on 2 more resources to make something else, right? But there's a little bit less of a synergy there in a certain archetype where you're trying to swing a Nothos for 6 a lot, and you just might not be set up for those auras because they don't have go again, right? Or they proc on the next turn.
They do have go again.
Well,
but
some
they
of them
don't proc.
Yeah, they proc on like the next turn and that sort of thing. So if your Bravo list is able to utilize them, that's great. But if it's not, and you're trying to swing a Nothos a lot and then like play defense reactions and play a bit of more of a fatigue or mid-rangey game, then they're maybe not the best example or not the best card for your deck, although still really powerful.
Yeah. So I would let me just jump in and clarify here that this is a really good example of understanding, the function of these card in your deck, right? So like Taylor said, if you have too many 2-cost cards, then it is difficult to turn a Nothos on, right? On the flip side, these auras fill a really valuable role of if you can pitch to play one and then pitch again to swing a Nothos, you can get it to 6, right? Yep. But in draft, you have no tectonic plating. So just swinging a Nothos on its own will always be for 4. And I've found that these auras with go again are a pretty critical way of getting a Nothos to 6 and setting up your next turn. So in that way, they do fill a really valuable role in that playing them buffs your next turn and buffs your weapon by 2, essentially. Right? However, if you have too many of them in your deck, then you might be playing one, but then you can just pitch 2 more auras and you can't trigger a Nothos. Right? So having maybe mostly 3-costed blues, but then a healthy, but not too many, ratio of these auras will kind of get you your best results. Right? Having none, a Nothos is always for 4. Having too many, you're just kind of clunking out, and it's not worth the damage trade or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Other things in the Bravo deck too are like things to consider, like so blues are of utmost importance, right? And so when you're thinking about the backbone of your Bravo deck, just picking any old blues maybe isn't the best. It's fine, but you could take it one step further. So for example, if you look at Crush Confidence or blue or Debilitate, both in blue, right? On second cycle, you get one more. So okay, hold on, excuse me. So blue Debilitate costs 4, right? So you need to use Bravo's ability that costs 2. So you're going to pitch 2 blues anyway. And I'm pretty sure, I don't have it pulled up, but blue Debilitate does 1 more point of damage at blue than Crush Confidence does. And so that 1 extra point of damage with Bravo's ability to dominate might be worth it over its ease in which to cast it, right? With that you get with Crush Confidence, because that comes in for 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So if you choose a 4-costed blue attack on second cycle, you might be able to edge out that dominated attack to win you the game because it does 1 more point of damage.
Yep.
That makes sense?
It does.
Cool. Sorry I stumbled there, but I don't play Guardian too much, so I had to really remember what those cards did.
It's so good. It's all good. We're unpacking, a lot here. And I would synthesize it down into, you're not asking yourself, how good is this card, right? You're asking this, how good is this card in my game plan?
Right.
And some cards are just so critical. Like if we talk about Katsu, you need 0-cost blues. Right. Otherwise the deck kind of just doesn't function, or you're forgoing your weapons, which is insane. Right. And, or in Dorinthia, right? At face value, you're like, oh, boom, I have all of these red attack reactions, and it's like, I'm going to super hard punish my opponents for not having enough defense reactions or under blocking, or if they try to hold some cards, right? Which is true, right? You'll like push a bit of damage. But, you quickly realize these like attack reactions are kind of like a dime a dozen, right? And they have their role. But what you're really after is sources of go again for Dawnblade.
Right.
And there are only a few cards that do this, and this is really what makes your deck hum. So, while you're, you think of Dory in terms of attack reacting your sword, punishing players. But then once you've like played limited a bit, then you realize like, oh, my threats are kind of empty and my damage trade ratio is too low.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah.
So I actually need to, get these other cards that, you look at Driving Blade standalone, right? It's pretty good, kind of expensive. You can't play it and Dawnblade and a 1-cost reaction, right? It's like a little clunky, but then once you start to weigh it in terms of its performance in an actual game scenario, the value goes way up.
Yeah. And so then the next layer of this, right, is you go, okay, so if I play Driving Blade and Dawnblade for 1 blue, that's X damage with go again. So then I need either a free attack to follow it up with, or a whole other 2 cards, or potentially 1 to swing Dawnblade again, or to use another attack. So then you go, well, what's a little easier, right? A free cost attack. So then you just get like Wounding Blow, which is free. So you just go Driving Blade into Dawnblade into Wounding Blow for free.
Yeah,
right.
They overblock.
Yep. Hard punish, right? And Wounding Blow gets overlooked, I think, a lot because it doesn't have go again, and it's just like the most baseline card. But in this scenario, if you get a bunch of Driving Blades, you can just like hard punish your opponent with like a bunch of extra damage.
Right. And like, so Flock of the Featherwalkers is kind of a similar card, right? Like, I don't really like that card. But then when you consider what the Quicken token does in Dory, its value goes up.
Yeah.
Quite a lot.
Yep, totally. So to kind of condense this into like a bite-sized chunk, right? You don't always need to be looking for the best card in draft. There should be times when you are picking the right card over what is considered the best card. So rather than picking the most powerful attacks, sometimes you need to pick resources, element cards, defense reactions, etc. for whatever archetype you're starting to build. This is one of the beautiful things I think about draft is you get a deck build on the spot. And as you like start to think about these things in this way and get the practice in it, it can be really, really rewarding where you're like, ooh, yeah, this... You can get really into like, oh yeah, this blue resource curve, so sick, it has this upside on second cycle,
Totally. Like I got 7 non-attack actions in chain, man. I'm gonna blow these fools out, you know, because you don't understand how good that is until you play it.
yeah, exactly. So our next topic is...
I have one more tip for this one.
Oh, okay, great. I forgot to ask.
I want to remind everyone to identify the win conditions of your deck. And this varies, when you're drafting your deck, not just individual cards, right? A crucial component is win conditions. And so in some sets, like maybe Aria, it's a bit more fluid. You're looking for synergy and combos and consistency. Or sometimes you're looking for blocking until you can Oakenold fuse, right? But in other sets, it might be like a bit more clear cut, right? Like, so, if I'm drafting Monarch, I will, I'll look at my deck afterwards or as I'm doing it and I'll see, how many win conditions do I have, right? Like, so I have a pump and an overload. Okay. If I'm going into a slower matchup, I can pitch this or I can arsenal the pump until I see the overload. I'm a little bit short of win conditions. Maybe in Leviathan, I'm going to grab this Writhing Beast Hulk.
Right.
And then as I'm playing, I'm going to understand how many I have, and I'm going to know, can I afford to block with this card? How fast is this game? Can I afford to pitch it? Do I need to arsenal it and use it soon? Because I'm not very good at memorizing every card in my deck. But it is easy to look at your deck in the interactions and just make a note of like 4 different things. Right. So I'm looking for these cards. These cards will win me the game. This, and sometimes you'll be looking at your hand and you'll be like, is this worth the trade? What does this do? And then you'll, remember back and you'd be like, oh no, this is not one of my 3 power combos.
Right.
Right. I'm going to block and I'm going to swing my weapon and I'm going to, maintain my life total and the game state at a point where then I can then capitalize on my powerful cards later.
Right.
And it varies a lot, right? Like Azalea might need to pitch stack a buff and an arrow so she can hit it for dominate. Whereas Bravo just has dominate on demand.
Right.
Right. So then you're kind of only looking for his powerful red card. Right. And it varies quite a lot for heroes, but it is a very important thing to understand, as you're picking cards.
Totally.
Does this synergize, block, what role does it fill? But also, is this a win condition or is it part of one?
Right. So we're going to move on to reading your seat, but before we get there, we're going to take a short commercial break, and then we'll be right back.
Have you ever been belittled by brutes? Perhaps you've been overwhelmed by non-stop ninja naughtiness. Tired of being whipped by wizards and warriors? Are you wrecked non-stop by rune blades?
Then what you need is Techlo. At Techlo Industries, we provide the tech you need to survive the wilds both in and outside the city of Metrix. At its core, Techlo is all about speed, and our products are legendary. We have the heart and the drive to keep you alive. Techlo Industries, building a better future, yesterday.
We hope you enjoyed that commercial break. Thanks again to everyone who submitted a commercial to our contest. We will be airing them sporadically to, appreciate their effort and give them a little spotlight.
Hell yeah. All right. Reading your seat. So one of the more, speaking of seats, my seat is very squeaky. Hopefully you can't hear it on the podcast. This is one of the more important skills to help you level up your draft game, and definitely takes a lot of practice. I think some of these other things we've talked about, like evaluating cards, identifying bomb cards, thinking about synergies, that sort of thing, can all be done pre-draft. But reading your seat is a skill that takes a lot of drafts. So you got to get to skirmish, you got to get to the road to nationals, you got to get in there and friggin' draft and keep this in mind as well. And you're like, wow, Taylor and Isaac, how many things do you need to keep in mind while drafting? Well, a lot, okay? This game's really hard.
However, the more you practice and try to keep this in mind, the more it'll kind of become automatic, right? You won't have to critically think about every little step in the way once you have more experience.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So we talked about this a bit in the part 1, right? Mm-hmm. And we have talked about it a bit in the previous episodes. So we're not going to recap everything about reading your seat here, but I can promise you one thing: if you try to force, listen up. If you try to force a hero, you will probably not win the tournament, right? If you got some secret sauce and know something everybody else doesn't, and you force it, you might get away with it. But in general, right, everybody who tries to force something, you're just like the 5th Briar at the table and your deck sucks.
Yeah.
Right.
It only takes you so far, right? Great strategy, not a great strategy. Okay strategy early in a meta, right?
Yeah.
So
especially if it's not the desired hero by most people.
Opening weekend in Road to Nats, you're going to see it. People are like, oh yeah, you just forced Dromai and you win. That's it. Super easy. Uprising solved. Right?
Yeah, she's pretty broken, actually.
Yeah, so just people are going to say that, and then you're going to go to your draft and you're going to try to force it, and then you're going to be like, God, my deck sucks. And it's like, well, yeah, because everybody now has learned how this set works. So they're a little bit more adept at reading their seat and understanding what cards are being picked and when ones aren't. So the first step, like we talk about in episode 1, is to remain open, right? So when you remain open, it means, to recap briefly, that you can pivot to any hero in the draft, right? And so making sure your first couple of choices you make allow you that flexibility, and then that allows you to read signals about what cards are being picked, right? and that you can then be sending signals, hopefully, to the person you're passing to about what also is being picked. So the easy part of this, right, is noticing what cards are left, right? It's like, oh, there's 3 ninja cards in this pack, and there's 1 illusionist, and there are no ice cards, right? So I'm thinking, okay, ninja's open, so I'm gonna start picking ninja cards, right? Which is okay. That's like the surface level way to read your seat and what's open. But what you really need to do to take this to the next level is trying to remember the composition of the packs leading up to that moment, so that you know what has been picked, not just what remains. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because as we know in Flesh and Blood packs, the skew of talent cards in every pack is slightly different, right? Because it's you could have more earth cards in one pack, more lightning cards in one pack, differing by 1s or 2s. But that really matters when cards are being picked and we're trying to read the signals. So if you know that there were more of a certain talent card or class card in a certain pack, and there still remains that, then you can for sure know that class or that talent is open, right?
Yeah. And so there's a couple ways to do this, right? Like the first one is easy, right? You pick powerful generics that will perform in any deck. Red Fate for Scene, red Scar for a Scar, right? This is pretty baseline, pretty easy. Those can be pack 1, pick 1s, whatever. However, this doesn't mean that you cannot pick powerful talent or class cards, right? You should be picking powerful talent or class cards that come your way, right? So there's a few things that happen here, right? If you get past, Channel Mount Heroic, right? If you pass it along, you're sending a very strong signal that Earth is open. So on pack 2, the person to your left will be gobbling Earth up, and that will not be open for you. It will also, arm your opponent with a very powerful card. So you're going to pick this Channel Mount Heroic, right? You may not play it, but you're getting sent a signal, and you are sending some signals, right? And you're going to take it, and it's going to be in your, I want to say in your arsenal, but that's a part of the game. It's going to be in your quiver, right? And you can use it. So a lot of times the way that I will stay open is I will have, for example, I'll have, like, let's talk about Monarch, right?
Yep.
I'll have 2 generic cards, powerful generics. I'll have 2 light cards, and I'll have 2 shadow cards, and I'll have a Soul Reaping or something like that. You know what I mean?
Sick.
And then maybe I have, I don't know, just a really powerful, prism card or something.
Red War Tune.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at my cards, I only have 2 generics out of 8 cards, right? But I'm still able to pivot into any class I want. Now, I have 8 cards, and it's time for me to make up my mind because I only have so many picks left, right?
Correct.
But so here, if I pivot into Chain, I already have 3 powerful cards ready to go. Or sorry, 5 powerful cards, counting the generics, right? If I pivot into Bolton, I have 4 playable cards in this deck, right? So I guess I'm making this point to say that, like, you don't have to forego powerful cards or very specific powerful cards because you're going to want those for your deck, potentially. You're not going to want to see them in your opponent's deck, and you're not going to want to send that signal that thing is open in case that's where you want to go, right? What you don't want to do is pick 8 Oldhim cards all right in a row,
Yeah.
and then find out, or like 8 Ice or Oldhim cards just right out of the gates, especially if they're just average cards and you're trying to force it, because then you're going to find out the 2 people to your right or picking Earth Oldhim, and there's just a lot of cards in the first packs, right? So you also had some, but now they're both picking Oldhim, and you're screwed, right? You're not going to have any selection at all throughout the draft. All right. So that was a bit of a
that was
a bit
great.
of a scenario there, but I'm just trying to explain what
that's
staying
great.
open is a little more intricate than just like, oh, I got a bunch of generics.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
Yeah, totally. No, it's that's a great way to break it down with that bit of math. An example from real life where I was like less good at reading my seat. I was in a draft and I was like, I forget who the heroes are that I was sandwiched between, but the only thing I could figure out that wasn't being picked was ice. And I got some arrows. So I had this really weird ice Lexi deck that had so few arrows. And it only really had lightning arrows, right? So I'm like in this weird zone where I'm flipping up ice cards and then firing free arrows, right? So I'm in this scenario where I play this weird mid-range game that only wins me 1 out of my 3 games, but I'm like blocking with 2 cards, frostbite, free arrow, I'm like trying to play Oldhim, but I only have arrows, and the reason I got into that scenario was I was only looking at what cards were passed to think about what was open rather than what cards I had seen and what was left, if that makes sense, right? If I had noticed that this draft had kind of an absurd amount of like ice cards really early on, then I would have noticed that the hero cards are the ones that were in short order. So it wasn't that the draft was my people passing to me were just picking hero cards over element cards, and I thought I was like one up on them because I was like, you need elements, everybody. They had more clearly the people passing directly to me, like the seat next to on my right and to their right, had identified that, oh, there are plenty of ice or element cards, but the hero cards are in short supply. So it kind of flipped the draft on its head a little bit. So kind of partway through pack 1 and the beginning of pack 2, I was just like, sweet, I'm going to be set for class cards. But then it wound up like not being the case. So I had a really weird seat, which I kind of half identified what was open, but it kind of punished me in terms of like my power level compared to everybody else. But I also had made this weird situation where I'd taken all the ice cards and then the Oldhim next to me had nothing to fuse with and wound up just taking Guardian cards. And this was really early on. And then they had like a no fuse Oldhim that was the 3-for-7, 3-for-6 deck and just beat the crap out of everybody, So it was, it was an interesting situation to be in. But if I had more correctly identified what my seat really was and what cards were in the draft, I would have maybe been able to up the power level of my deck by just like a smidgen and maybe would have performed better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so I made my point about, picking select cards from each class, powerful cards, and staying open just because, like once you're, it's pack 7 or pick 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever, probably a little earlier, hopefully pick 7 here. You've now seen enough to make an educated decision about what is open, right? So, I always use the example. I've pack 1, picked 1 at Channel Mount Heroic, and then like was maybe the only Lexi at the table, right? I would 100% take that Lexi deck over 1 in 4 Briars with a Channel Mount Heroic because the way that Aria works is that you don't have one powerful card that wins you the game. You have a consistent deck. Right. And, different sets move at different speeds. Right. So you can kind of be aware of that. Like if you're, if you're in Welcome to Wraith, you can kind of like maybe lean on your more powerful cards a little bit better. But, reading your seat is huge. You can also be kind of screwed by the people you're playing with, right? People can change their minds and pivot like way too late. They can draft really weirdly and send weird signals. So you're going to have to be a bit flexible and dynamic in this situation. But having a clear-cut understanding of the heroes and their capabilities and the archetypes in the set will allow you to appropriately weigh which strategies you can still kind of go for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally. I think all of that is great. I have nothing else on this topic. Would you like to move into tips while playing if you are done?
Sure. This little tidbit will kind of lead us into it anyway.
Okay, great.
Sometimes I notice, and I'm like unsure exactly how much this helps out, but I'll definitely notice at a table, some people are like pretty uneasy or uncertain or kind of waffling or maybe pivot or like a bit miserable. Some people are like fairly confident and make their picks quickly and are very assured in their seat. And sometimes you can kind of notice this and you can kind of rely on these people that are a bit more decisive to stay in their lane and make their picks correctly. And again, I'm like unsure how to vocalize how I make use of this, but it's definitely something I notice. And I think that it does give me a bit of data when drafting. If like the person to my right is like ironclad in their picks, then I can rely on what I'm getting past. So maybe I can hedge my bets a little less so or something like that.
Yeah.
That came out a little bit, a little more waffly or unclear than I intended.
No, I just thought that was some high level shit where
good.
you're reading your seat, you're evaluating the cards, you're looking for bombs, and you're playing a game of like reading people's tells all at the same time.
Totally.
This is why you top 8'd at nationals and I did not.
I also always play footsie with the person across from me to just get in their head.
Oh yeah, totally.
You know?
When the person sets the cards down, I also go for those cards and slowly caress their hand.
Yeah.
As I get them and stare at them in the eyes.
Tee.
Yeah, and then I do that, and it's a really interesting draft when you take it to that level.
I like a little sensuality in my draft experience.
Yeah, totally. Keeps me loose.
Let's talk about playing the game a bit.
Totally.
So you drafted, now you're playing.
Well, my segue is to piggyback off of something you said about weird signals, right? And that, like we said in episode 1, is part of the game, right? And then so these tips for playing will hopefully, when the draft gets weird, like footsies or weird signals or whatever, that then the second half of this whole experience is playing. And so you then might have had weird signals and you can't get tilted before you play. You just have to continue to play and outplay your opponent, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room in playing tighter than your opponent, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a pretty good or average deck, you can still pull out games, right? 2 out of 3 games you can win.
Yeah.
Just through not being too grumpy about your deck or tilted or whatever.
Right.
There's a whole nother game you're in now. You're actually just playing the game.
Totally. And limited play really emphasizes fundamentals, right? So if you don't have the fundies down, arsenaling correctly, pitch stacking, evaluating the potential damage output of your opponent compared to your own, tempo, episode whatever that was we did, 41, go listen to that about tempo. If you don't have all of these basics down, but you have the most powerful deck, you could still get outplayed by the person sitting next to you who you are like, tee-hee, weird signals, footsie, because they have a better understanding of the fundamentals of the game. So you still have to play.
Yes.
Even though you've drafted these cards, right?
Yeah. And we've kind of, I've touched on, I'm going to blow through these because I've touched on this a bit already in this episode,
Sure.
right? But like I said, knowing your win conditions, right? I have this win condition. I need to keep my life total at this point or higher and able to be able to take some damage and save the 3 or 4 cards or whatever I need to then play to win.
Right.
Right. So even if you see your win condition, but you only have 7 life left, you're just dead because you have to block,
Yeah.
and can't employ it.
Right.
This comes up quite a lot, right? Like you've crafted your deck, you've played the game technically well, but you have not manufactured a position where you can execute your win condition.
Right.
And then you lose. I want a draft game against somebody who had a better deck and a better game plan than me. Right. I was on like Ice Oldhim because that was my seat, and I was like, didn't know that that's a bad archetype kind of sometimes. I don't know. But and he was on Fatigue Oldhim, and he would have got me, except he took one greedy turn where he chose to take some damage to then deal me a ton of damage. Right. It's a very a isolated turn. He won that turn, right?
Yeah.
It's a very smart play. Outplayed me in terms of just that exchange, right? Very good of him. However, his win condition was fatiguing me, and my win condition was killing him, right? So he got
That's always my win condition.
Yeah. So he had gotten to a low enough life threshold that I pitch stacked my deck, and with like 6 cards left or whatever, I might have pumped and fused a glacial, or maybe just fused a glacial and like hit him for exactly lethal with like barely any cards left. And that was due to my tight play in that scenario, but would have not have been possible if he did not, or if he had just like stuck to the plan and played every turn to his win condition.
Right. Yeah.
That's just an example of a turn in which he beat me that turn and lost the game.
Yeah. Well played, sir.
Thanks, I guess. Capitalized on their mistake.
Yeah, totally. Let's see. I'm trying to think of that too. Like, there is a scenario like where you can open the center to dominate for the win. Also as ninja, and I've done that before too. Like, you keep pitching your open the center back into the deck and not playing it for like that early burst damage, and then when they get low enough and they have to like block a Kodachi, and then you're gonna hit for like 1 or something with your like go again head jab or whatever, and then you can like go fetch open the center or whatever, things like that. Right.
Yeah.
Recognizing those things are really, really important, rather than just being like damage now is as good as damage later is not usually the case.
Yes, definitely. You got anything else there? I lost my spot.
Yeah. So one of our tips earlier was to recognize what has been picked, not just what's left over. So some of those things can be like, how many lightning presses were there? How many turn timbers are there? How many of those turn timbers or lightning presses did I get? So that then when you're facing another opponent who can utilize those cards, you can kind of metagame already what they have in their deck and what you have to play around, right? So if you saw 2 red turn timbers, but you didn't draft them because you're in a different deck, if you come up against Oldhim, you can't expect that if you're pumping your fused arrow for anywhere between 6 and 8, and you're against Oldhim, there's a chance that it's gonna just get totally shut down, and you'll have played into this like very big turn where you're like, I'm gonna deal damage and hit effect and stuff, and I'm going to get some more tempo. But then they're just going to shut you down and steal all of the tempo you just had. And now maybe you don't have another red arrow or a red pump or something like that,
Yeah, and the situation you describe is a very tough place to be in, right? Because you still have to try, right?
Yeah.
But so, maybe you can play around it a bit, right? Where you like, pitch to load a yellow arrow and you use your yellow pump and try to fish that out.
Right.
And then you arsenal your red pump, maybe an overflex, right? So then if you do fish out a turn timber, then the next arrow is going to be overflexed, hopefully another pump and a red arrow.
Yeah.
And really capitalize on them misplaying that bit. There's only so much you can do there, right? But you can try to try to look for those kind of, little play arounds maybe to manage your resources. Another thing I would say is like I keep saying the sets vary quite a lot.
Yeah.
Some sets, pitch stacking is crucial. Some sets you're not going to see your pitch stack, or just some matchups, right? So understanding if you're trying to burst now or if you're trying to pitch stack and manage resources based on the set you're in, the matchup you're in, and the behavior of your opponent is pretty important.
Yeah. Like Arcane Rising is usually slow enough to where, at least I have found, especially in our last draft, that I can like pitch stack with Azalea and then just like loop salvage shots for like the win at the end of the game, which I've got to say makes you feel like a shiny golden god when you can do that. It's like so fun. But things like Tales of Aria, those games are way too fast. They're over in 4 turns, right?
Yeah.
So there's like, unless you're Fatigue Oldhim, and you're playing into Fatigue Oldhim, there's no reason for you to pitch stack your deck, really. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of weigh the damage output, and if your opponent doesn't block, how much lower their life total will be, and how, who's going to blink first type of deal. Can you make that happen? Can you make a great exchange, right? Like you can, potentially you might have to block first, but you've thought of this. So you've like kept 2 cards in hand, one to pitch and one to fuse your red Entwine Earth with. So you come in for 8, right? If it's the red one, which is a huge swing.
Great card.
Mid game, late game, And so, that's just another tiny play to consider as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuff like that. These little tips.
Definitely. And yeah, how do I phrase this? Based on what you've seen, taking calculated risks sometimes. Like, I've been in a scenario where I did not see many or any Sigil of Sufferings, and I got the impression, based on the packs you see, you can kind of get a feel for maybe how many Briars there are, right? Like, you can't really tell exactly, but you can tell if there's like 1 or 4, which one's closer, right? So like I've had the feeling that there's quite a lot of Briars, and I haven't seen many Sigils, right? So I made the decision to go to 1, guarantee the win, rather than block, threaten some mid-rangey damage, not kill them, and then kind of like rely on some more variance or like hope that I don't brick or whatever, right? And that was just based on my opponents didn't have an arsenal, and I hadn't, these other factors, right? So I don't know if that's the right call, but I just went for it, right? Or, against Oldhim, maybe you're just trying to like hope they don't have it, right? So maybe sometimes you're trying to sniff it out, but maybe it's like turn 1 and you have the gas. So I'm gonna roll the dice and bet that they don't have a red turn Timber in Arsenal, because that'd be pretty unfortunate for me. I'm gonna swing for like 12 Dominate here and just bank on, they haven't seen that card in the first 4 cards,
right?
So I guess what I'm talking about here is just it's never like a perfect, methodical assessment. Sometimes you're just weighing risk versus reward, or how it feels.
Yeah, totally. That's a great, like, even though we're talking about recognizing all of these things, you still are like you're playing the game, right? And part of the game is just making a calculated risk, right? Or
unknowns and variance.
Yeah, totally. A bit of a gamble that could pay off quite well, right? I can't play around this. If I do, I just don't win. So I'm just going to go for the win, right?
Right.
Stuff like that. For sure. I can no longer think of any examples. I believe I have said my piece on this subject.
Me too. I think we've been at this long enough. I hope you guys have really enjoyed this episode and this set of tandem episodes on draft. We really love draft, and tried to share most of what we've learned with you all, and hope you've picked up some tidbits. If you have any hot takes or tips or different takes or disagreements that we have missed or misconstrued or, misunderstood or whatever, you can contact us. You can like put them in the comments on our YouTube or whatever. Let us know. This is draft is a game that no one's mastered, right? Because it's always a different puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's about your performance on the fly.
Yeah. And I really want to reiterate what Isaac said there. Like, please feel free to have a conversation with us about the topics we talk about on this podcast, even though they might not be public, right? Slide into our DMs on Twitter. Send us an email, right? Those sort of things. We would be more than happy to engage with you on certain topics or maybe re-explain them over DMs or whatever. That would be super great for us. Also, side note, I keep forgetting to mention this. I'm kind of locked out of our Instagram page right now. There's some sort of weird error in Instagram's code that I had to input our birthday, and then I chose we were 1 year old, and then they're like, well, you have to be 13, so you have to prove that you're not 13. And I was like, but this is a business. So anyway, it won't let me log.
I have to prove I'm not a 1 year old using your Instagram page.
Yeah. I know. And so now there's like an error when I try to log back in that is like not resolved. So if you're like wondering why it's like dark over there and maybe you're sending us cool stuff, I can't see it. So get a Twitter or email us if you don't want a Twitter. So,
or when we break back in, we'll get back to you.
Yeah. So all of that. Isaac, I believe you have a riddle me this.
Yep, this was a dense episode. We're going to skip our segments, but I do have a riddle me this that's a bit out of the ordinary. It's mostly just based on spoilers, but riddle me this. What is up with these dual specializations referencing Phoenix Flames, right? We have no indication of how Dromai uses Phoenix Flames. Why does her specialization interact with them? Why isn't it just a Phi specialization? Please just tell me already, LSS. It's a lot of debate in my head.
Totally. Thanks for being with us. We really appreciate all of you. We will hopefully see you soon or talk to you soon. And I hope you have a great day. We both hope you have a great day or evening or afternoon.
Yep. Whatever time it is for you.
Totally.
Good evening.
And we'll see you next time. Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at the Attack Action Podcast. On Twitter, we are at BattleBro Taylor and at BattleBro Isaac. Shoot us an email, theattackactionpodcast@gmail.com.
If you would like to support us, like and subscribe, shop for singles using our affiliate link, or support our Patreon for as little as $4 per month.